Rosen, Atlantic Monthly Press. Tough luck on Luckman. Sid Luckman, the Bear quarterback in the 40s. Father, a treacherous guy, went to Sing Sing for murder. Died, by the way, at Sing Sing in the mid-40s. Never saw, 1944, I think. Never saw his kid play. And we need to do a little background on him. All right, how bad a guy, Richard, was Meyer Luckman? Give him a little rundown. Go ahead.
Not as bad as it might appear, I think, from the simple, from the single fact that he killed his brother-in-law, although that's quite terrible. But he owned a trucking company. He was a Russian Jewish immigrant, tough guy who used to sell flour from a push cart. And by the mid-30s, had a trucking company. I don't know, 15, 20, 25 trucks. He trucked flour to bakeries in New York and Brooklyn. But in those days, if you were in certain industries, you fell under the influence of Louis Lepke and his rackets. They controlled, among other industries, the flour and baking industry. So in those days, you played ball, or else you could get acid in your face. You might find your trucks in the river, or worse. So he didn't have much choice as a businessman trying to support a family of 4 kids, but to play along and pay his weekly subsidy to the mob. Okay, so that's what I thought the case was, and that much was true. Then I found out by digging in the New York Times and other papers that 6 months before he killed his brother-in-law, he had been at a very high-level meeting of mobsters in Brooklyn who were having trouble with a teamster who didn't want his truckers to cooperate, take another pay cut from Louis Lepke and these big guys. So they invited the teamster, his name was William Snyder, to a restaurant on the Lower East Side. Everyone was sitting at a table, and William Snyder came in and sat down, and another man came in behind him and shot him. He died a day later, but it was that simple. And Meyer Luckman was at that table. So he saw in the fall of 34 how you could get rid of a problem. It was pretty much that easy. The cops called everybody in for questioning, but of the 11 people at the table, including Meyer Luckman, nobody had seen anything, that sort of thing. So 6 months later, Meyer Luckman's trying to solve his own problem. He hired his wife's younger brother. Let's imagine he's kind of a punky, flashy kid in his 30s. Meyer is now in his 40s. So he hires this kid as kind of a bookkeeper. Now, the kid's got a really bad gambling problem, horses and baseball. And he owes a lot of money. Ultimately, that's to the mob. He owes the money, and he's not paying up. So he's embezzling money from his brother-in-law, Meyer, to pay off his debts. And everybody in town, everybody in the trucking industry seems to know that he's doing it. So Meyer goes to Sam, is his name, says, Sam, are you stealing money? And Sam just stonewalls the guy. And Meyer gets more proof, and he goes back to the kid and says, you're taking money from me. Tell me what you're doing. And he says, nothing, nothing. We're family. And he can't take it finally anymore. So Meyer decides, having seen how you could solve a problem, to lure him to the trucking garage and with 2 accomplices to beat him to death. They beat him with a pool cue that was filled with lead pellets, and then for good luck they strangled him in this special noose that the mob used, where they would tie your hands and your feet behind your head and then around your neck. So every time you struggled to liberate yourself, you would essentially strangle yourself.
Wow.
Now you would think, okay, so now nobody's going to talk. It's fine. He's gotten rid of it. He'll tell his wife, I'm sorry about your little brother. I don't know what happened. Some bum came in and shot him. The problem was somebody called in the crime. The cops showed up. They caught Meyer and his 2 accomplices literally red-handed. They had blood on their clothes, on their hands, and they were hauled in. And lo and behold, not long after, they were released. The grand jury found no probable cause, despite all the evidence, despite the blood on the hands. What happened, of course, was that Meyer Luckman and his cronies, and that may have included, Louis Lepke or his lieutenants, they established a bribe fund. And very quickly, and my book lays out all the evidence of this, very quickly they bought off policemen, they bought off an assistant district attorney, and other people, enough so, and a grand juror or two is all it takes. So they were free. But 6 months later, for political reasons, the fact that they had been released was causing a scandal. And so the guy running for district attorney made a big fuss, and they rearrested him. And this time there was no way for Meyer to bribe his way out of trouble, convicted of second-degree murder, and went off to Sing Sing. That was in 36. Sid, meanwhile, is this huge star. He's been a star at Erasmus Hall forever. Best schoolboy athlete, football player in New York, along with Marty Glickman. They played against each other and became lifelong friends. And so you can imagine how disruptive this is. It's hard to imagine having to deal with this. So as I like to say, what are the odds that a mobbed-up father would have a son who would become a seminal figure in the one sport that imitates gangland warfare?
Unbelievable. Now, how about Lepke here? This guy's who ended up getting executed, murdering. What you say he killed 70 people who Meyer Luckman worked for? This Murder Incorporated. We all know the song Murder Incorporated. We've all heard the phrase. Explain that for a sec. Let me hear.
Okay. Well, Murder Incorporated was the name given retroactively by a journalist to the hired hitmen that Lepke hired to rid his empire of anybody who might spill the beans, who might talk to the DA too much, who wasn't loyal. Very scrupulous about getting rid of those people. So people like Kid Twist, Relish, Tic-Tac, Tannenbaum, these are famous names in the annals of hired assassins. So, and among the people he killed were a lot of otherwise upstanding citizens trying to do their best, but not really wanting to cooperate with the mob. And it became a mission for Tom Dewey, who was then the district attorney, to get Lepke. But it was very, very hard because, as with Trump, for instance, you can't, he didn't leave a paper trail. Nobody would testify. Lepke told me to go kill Sam Rubin. So it took a while to get him, but get him he did. And ironically, he went to Sing Sing in 44, where Meyer had now been for 8 years. And when he arrived in Sing Sing, Meyer was fading fast from heart disease. And who knows if they communicated with each other? Because after all, the reason Meyer Luckman was in Sing Sing ultimately was that he had to do business with people like Louis Lepke. So when Lepke shows up to be executed, Meyer's on his deathbed. Meyer dies in January of 44, and in March of 44, Louis Lepke is electrocuted in Old Sparky, and that more or less ends that chapter of organized crime in New York. But of course, organized crime is never dead. Other people, take over.
Remember, Dewey,
the fact
folks,
that Sid
ran
Luckman's father.
Right. Dewey ran for president twice and had Truman beat in 48 and lost late. Keep that in mind about Dewey, who was later the governor of New York. What a job by Richard Rosen. We're going to wrap it up in a sec as we continue on this busy program. You got a little feel of Luckman. You got a little feel of his father. We got to talk about Luckman, his afterlife after football. The guy did everything. We'll continue with that in a sec. Don't go away.